Welcome to the Bear Archery Podcast. I've got a fun episode. I am joined by Scott Niska, who is the creative director at Tacticam. But outside of that, Scott just shares some really, really good content, sharing the story about his hunts. And I wanted to have Scott on to just kind of talk about sharing our story. How can we effectively share our story as hunters? It's so hard. You get 2 pictures, 3 pictures, and 120 words on social media, and you're expected to share the entire story of your hunt, and it's really difficult. And so we just talk about trying to capture the story in a picture or in a video to be able to share that with the world. Some tips on how to do that, some instructions on how to do that, and then we kind of get into expectations versus reality when it comes to hunting. And the sad truth is, if you want to shoot a 180, you've got to be hunting where there's a 180. We talk about how to grow those 180s. We talk about if you live in a place, or if on your properties there's no chance of a 180, how can you create that environment to grow a 180? So guys, it's a fun episode. It's an informative episode. It's an inspirational episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation with Scott. He does a really good job of sharing the story, something I want to do better about, something I don't do a good job about, admittedly. And so I just wanted some personal tips and tricks on how to share my story better. Guys, this episode, as always, is brought to you by our good friends over at ScentLock. I would highly encourage you as we're getting into the summer months. ScentLock has some incredible clothing to go out and work on tree stands, to go out and work on your properties in. The Phantom Pant is absolutely incredible. I would highly encourage you to go check out their entire lineup at scentlock.com. But guys, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
With over 90 years of innovation, Bear Archery continues pushing toward the goal of founder Fred Bear, making archery accessible for all. Fred believed the history of the bow and arrow were the history of mankind, and everyone should immerse themselves in the outdoor experience. Welcome to the Bear Archery Podcast, where the mission is simple: to hunt, grow, and inspire others.
Guys, I am a big believer in custom-built aftermarket strings. Basically, the moment I pull my bow out of the box, whether it's a new compound, a new recurve, a new longbow, I'm going to be putting a custom-built aftermarket string on that bow. At Dominant Strands, they're going to be using high-quality fibers from BCY, like a low wax 452X. The low wax content and the special way that they pre-stress and pre-stretch those strings and cables make for a very, very stable set of strings. They're going to last longer and they're going to shoot better. There's going to be very little peep rotation. There's going to be very little stretch over time. You are going to be a lot happier in the long term. You're just going to have a lot better shooting experience when you upgrade those strings to an aftermarket custom-built set of strings. Plus, you can customize them any way you want. Now, I'm also a huge believer in custom-built strings for a longbow or recurve. Why? Because coming from the factory, they're not going to be using the highest quality materials. They're not going to be pre-stretching those strings over long periods of time. Whereas, again, if I call up Dominant Strands, they're going to build the best set of strings for that bow. I'm going to walk them through what I want out of that string, what I want out of that bow, and they're going to build a set of strings exactly to spec out of the best materials for that bow. Guys, a custom set, the best string you could ever buy for your recurve or longbow, is going to cost you about $30. That is the most bang for your buck that you can get when upgrading your longbow or recurve. You're going to get an incredible shooting experience upgrade for just $30. So I encourage everybody, the moment that recurve or longbow comes out of the box, upgrade it to a custom built string. Guys, the people over at Dominant Strands, they are unmatched when it comes to their customer service. You're going to call them up. You're going to talk to your string builder, the guy that's going to be building your strings. He's going to ask you what you're looking to get out of the bow. He's going to ask you about your bow. He's going to ask you about your nocks. He's going to ask you everything about your bow setup so he can build you the best set of strings for your bow. Guys, I would highly encourage everybody, no matter the bow, no matter the manufacturer, to consider upgrading your strings to a nice set of custom built aftermarket strings. My boys over at Dominant Strands, they do it, and they do it very, very well. Their turnaround time is incredible. Their attention to detail is unmatched. Guys, give them a call for your next set of strings, and I promise you, you will be happy. All right. So one of the things that if you follow Bear's social media, if you've seen him in the catalogs, on the websites, you've probably seen this dope picture of a guy with a moose on his back walking up to a plane. And ever since then, I've loved that picture, and never really knew much about it. And then I discovered Scott, and he took that photo. And so I just kind of wanted to touch base with you, not only about that, because we have a shared love for Bear and a shared love for ScentLock, and obviously just a shared love for hunting. But I also kind of wanted to use you to talk about telling the story visually, because you do a really good job of that. And I just think I've had that conversation with a lot of people, and hunting gets a lot less scrutinized when we as outdoorsmen share the full story, which is really hard to do in 2 photos and a 100-word description. It's really hard to tell the full story. And so I just kind of wanted to unpack that, how you visually kind of capture the story of the hunt. But before we jump in, man, give us an introduction to yourself.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the invite. So I'm Scott Niska. Right now I am creative director at Tacticam. In previous life before Tacticam, I was a freelance content creator, and I did a lot of work with Bear, work with ScentLock, just a lot of hunt and fish companies and brands. Those were kind of my bread and butter. I love telling stories visually. That's as soon as I picked up a camera and really started to figure out how everything started to work. That's when I really started to fall in love with, connecting people to adventures and hunts and, just the lifestyles that people want to live, I guess.
Now, what a lot of people don't understand is guys like yourself, which I just admire. And I wish I've tried so hard because I want to be able to do it. But guys like yourself, they almost would rather capture the hunt visually than even hunt themselves. And that's just it's just so cool, man. It's so cool to see a passion for wanting to tell that story, because so many guys, and hey, there's nothing wrong with a grip and grin in the back of a truck. If you have no capabilities, you don't own a good camera, you don't know how to do any of that stuff, I'm not telling you you're wrong. But I think there's a good way to share a story that's visually appeasing, appealing, it tells the story in a clean, classy way, and it doesn't put off anybody. And so I admire that, man. And I've tried so hard to be better at it. I just suck with cameras. I don't
know. Yeah, no. So my background, really ever since high school, I've been a graphic designer. Like my mom was a super gifted watercolor artist. And when I would try to sit down and paint with her, I've always been artistic, but I could never make a medium flow on paper or a canvas like I can on a computer or digitally. As soon as I found Adobe Photoshop, it was this is my thing. And so I think having a design background and understanding of composition and things like that, really plays into being able to position, to create an image. It's really easy to shoot a picture, but to create an image, like that moose, shot with the float plane in the background. I think my design background and just helps to be able to compose an image like that and really tell a story, with one capture.
So what do you give? I mean, other than equipment and go out and spend a whole bunch of money, because dude, these things right here are so stinking, advanced these days. You can get a good photo. So when we're talking field photos, people in the field wanting to just document their hunt and take photos. What are some quick, easy things that you could say, hey, this is going to give you better content? Like this is going to help you down the road just to take better, cleaner photos.
Yeah. So I always say when people ask me what camera should I get, because I get that question very often. I'm like, the best camera is the one you have on you. I don't care if it's a film camera, a Polaroid. Like if you have a camera on you to capture a moment, like that's the best camera for, in that moment. Like you said, smartphones these days, the quality that you get on the photo side and video side out of them is insane. A few weeks ago, I was just out moving some deer blinds and stuff with a couple buddies, and like I just made a quick little edit, for a story just on my cell phone, and like people were amazed that it was shot on a cell phone. But one thing I always like to tell people is that everybody, when they shoot their, especially hero pics, like grip and grins, like everybody shoots it at eye level, right? And that's what we are so used to seeing, that they're boring pictures. Like if you get down low, compose if it's a grip and grin with a deer, like compose the buck so there's nothing in the background. So like the sky, so the antlers are framed, in the sky, or just the biggest thing is getting foreground and background into the photo. When you're shooting at eye level, like you have zero depth in a photo, that's the angle that people are so used to seeing. So if you can get down lower, knee level, knee height, kind of like you start to work some foreground into it, but you also work background into it. And so that gives the photo depth and it makes it interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one of those deals, like you're not necessarily, used to back in the day, it was how can I make my deer look bigger? I'm going to long arm this thing and I'm going to sit 17 feet behind it. And that's not what I'm asking you to tell people I'm not asking you to tell people how to make it bigger. I just, when you present on social media, and I get this argument all the time, like, well, why do we care about what non-hunters think? We could go down that road forever. Short story is one day they're going to vote on your rights, and I want them to have a clean taste in their mouth about me when they vote on my rights to hunt. And if you think it's not possible, it's happening all around us. But anyways, when you share something on social media, you have such a short window, and it's such a small window to post a photo with a little description to tell the full story of that hunt. But when non-hunters are polled, or when the non-hunting community is polled, when told the full story, they're usually more apt to support us as hunters. And by full story, I mean the prep work, the hunt, the eating of that meat. We're given such a short window to share that. And if we represent part of that story with blood and guts and gore and just an unclassy photo, we've untold that story. We've ruined that story. Doesn't matter how good you showed the pre-work. Doesn't matter how good you show the eating of it. If you burn that bridge because it's a nasty, classless photo, there's no going back. You can't restore that. And so I just wish more people would consider the way that they represent the hunting community with a single photo. And so that's kind of my pet peeve. But man, when you see some people take photos, like when you see people with a deer, you're like, there's just something that makes you go, why is that so much better than mine? Like, why do they look so much better? And there's been a couple times where I've been like, super, super pleased to have like a cameraman in camp, and I get these photos and I'm like, holy crap, dude, I haven't had harvest photos like this in forever. And it's just, they look so much better, so much cleaner. It's phenomenal. And so I'm glad that you could share a couple little tips, just to help us regulars be a little better.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is like, with whitetails, you're 100% right. Like when I'm on a shoot, if I'm on a hunt with a buddy or, getting paid to do it, like I literally carry a roll of paper towels in my pack. I just to clean up the presentation of the animal, like you said, to not show disrespect to the animal, with whitetail deer, especially, sticking the tongue back in the mouth when you're taking pictures of it is key, because if that tongue is hanging out of that mouth, it just really detracts from the photo.
I remember, it was years ago, and I shot my biggest buck to date. And I actually had a cameraman, so I took like super good photos, but I didn't put the tongue back in the mouth. I didn't wipe the blood off the mouth. It was just there was blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was so proud to send this to Bear. And this was before I hosted their podcast. This was years ago when I was just a pro staff shooter. And I sent them these photos, and I was just like so proud of them. I'm like, I'm going to make the catalog, dog. Like, this is a great deer, good pictures. And the response was, I can't even post these. And I'm like, why? What do you mean you can't post these? Like, it's a great deer. They're good quality photos. And he said, dude, there's blood. His tongue's hanging out of his mouth. There's blood everywhere. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's what happens when you kill them.
Right.
And, I was just kind of upset. But then, as I grew as a sportsman, it kind of dawned on me like, okay, like I get what you're saying now. I understand where you're coming from. And so, yeah, man, I always carry wet wipes, a thing of wet wipes, just to even entry exit wounds. I mean, if it's just disgustingly bloody, because here's the thing, a little bit of common sense goes a long way. And this last year I shot a buck with my son, and he runs up, and there was a spot where the deer had flipped. Like he was obviously laying one direction and then flipped the other way. So on camera side of that deer, there was a massive puddle of blood where he had been laying before he flipped. And my son literally says, hey, Dad, he's 5. I don't remember how he worded it, but he's like, we should scoot him over so there's not a bunch of blood in the picture. And I'm like, yeah. Like, and of course for him, he's like, I don't know why he thought that, but he understood, hey, maybe it would look a lot better if there wasn't, a pile of blood in front of this deer that we're trying to photograph. And so that goes a long way, man. Just a little bit of common sense about what people want to see visually when they look at a deer.
Yeah, for sure. And it extends to the fishing side of things. If you're a bird hunter, it extends to there. Like, use common sense about what you're taking a photo of. And like you said, like, that one image can be how, you are reflected as a hunter, for a long time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When I shoot photos, like, there was definitely a phase very early on when I was trying to make things look big, and I'm very much out of that phase. Like, I want to give a photo. If somebody hangs that photo on the wall, like, I did my job.
Yeah.
Like, that's my goal.
And I think that just takes a little bit of maturing as a sportsman to understand, like, it's not about making them big. It's about honoring them how they were. And I think that's just, once people mature just a little bit, and again, I say just a little bit, because I don't even think it takes long to understand that, there's not a lot of like established, mature sportsmen who still try to do that. And it doesn't take long to realize, I want to honor him how he was. I don't want to try to make him something that he wasn't, because his life was valuable. He's valuable. I harvested him the way he was, so let's honor him the way he was. And that's what, there's been times where I shoot a deer and some ground shrinkage happens. There's also been some times where I shoot a deer and, I get up to him and I'm like, wow, he's actually a lot better than I thought he was. So it goes both ways, but that deer deserves to be honored the exact way he was, which is why, that's why I'm so passionate about organizations like Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett. If you think to yourself, well, I'm not a record book guy, it's not about me. You're right. It's not about you. It's about the animal, and it's about honoring him down to the very 1/8 of an inch of what he was. And it's about putting him in a book amongst his peers. It has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. You're right. It's a data point that conservationists can use, but it's also about putting that book. If I'm playing in a golf tournament this Saturday, and I suck at golf. I'm horrible at golf. I've played one time. It was the day after my vasectomy. So I was really high on painkillers and everything was turning black and blue. It was a bad day to play golf, but it's the only time I've ever played golf. This weekend, I'm playing in a golf tournament. If by the graces of God, I place in that tournament, I'm going to want my name on that wall with everybody else.
For sure.
The same is true with that deer. And you say, well, I've got him taxidermied. He's in my house. Well, that's good. You get to celebrate him, but let the world celebrate him. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it, because you're honoring that deer the way that he was. You're honoring him for what he was. Not just deer, everything. But cool. You've become passionate about the Alaskan XT, it seems.
Yeah.
One of the greatest bows ever made, in my opinion.
Honestly, that it's a hammer.
Yeah.
Like the value that bow has is like, people don't realize it enough.
It's insane. And what I don't get is I'll never understand that mentality of, but it's a budget bow. I'll never understand that, because dude, well, just share the story of the moose hunt. I mean, that's a moose hunt with a $700 bow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was epic. It's my wife's cousin. I've gotten to be really good friends with him. He's just a super passionate moose hunter. Goes up to Alaska every year, and we hooked up, and he's a pilot, float plane pilot. He's got his float plane license, and so we flew into that lake, and we camped on the shoreline, set up camp right there, and didn't have to go far for that moose. And like my whole goal wasn't even to capture the hunt, but to experience the hunt. And literally didn't get the camera out until after we were done, because it was a once in a lifetime thing, and just wanted to soak it in. But yeah, once it was done, we got to work and put everything together and got all those photos done. So
that's cool, man. But I asked that because I was at an event one time, and this guy won it wasn't an XT, I believe it was a Legend XR. And it was his first bow. He wins a Legend XR, and somebody, and then later in the night he won a moose hunt. And he's like, well, I think I'm going to get really good with this bow and take the bow. And somebody said, yeah, I would probably upgrade the bow before you go on the moose hunt though. And I was like, why? I said, why do you need to upgrade the bow? And this was right after, and this guy didn't, this was not confrontational. Like, even if it sounded confrontational, it was not confrontational.
Yeah, right.
This guy did not know that I represented Bear. He didn't know that. I just said, why? Mm-hmm. Why do you think he needs to upgrade it? And he just goes, well, it'd be hard for me to go on a $18,000 hunt with a $600 bow. And I'm like, why? And this was right after the time Chuck Adams had shot 2 new world records in Alaska with the Alaskan, 28 days alone in the backcountry, the definition of backcountry hunt. And I'm like, well, said, Chuck Adams, he just shot 2 new world records in Alaska with the Alaskan, which is the same price point as this bow. And he was like, what? Wow. And I'm like, yeah, I don't, gone are the days of having to spend thousands of dollars on a bow for it to perform. The technology is so advanced these days that they can pack, a whole lot of good bow into this package for this price. And that Alaskan XT is the definition of a price point bow that just absolutely performs.
It absolutely outshoots the price point.
Yeah.
Like, the first time I shot it, I have a couple of the Bear flagships, and the first time I shot it, I was just blown away. It was absolutely incredible.
The amount of people at Bear,
right out of the box. What's that?
The amount of people at Bear that are like, world-class shooters, understand everything about archery equipment. And I'm like, what are you shooting? And they're like, the Alaskan XT. And I'm like, really? Why not the Persist? And they're like, because the Alaskan XT. It's a better bow. And I'm like, you're telling, and these guys work at Bear. They're not paying for their bows. Yeah. And I'm like, so you're choosing the Alaskan XT. Take price off the table. It's not like you're choosing this bow over the Persist because of the way it performs. Yeah, 100%. I'd rather shoot this bow than that bow. If I have to go on a hunt, I want to take this one over that one. And I'm like, that says a lot, man, that the guys making the bows are like, this is a better bow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. haven't done it yet, but I really want to take, a harvest an animal just with the Alaskan XT ready to hunt package, just right out of the box. No upgrades, nothing. And
it wouldn't be hard.
No, it wouldn't be hard. If you're in an area that has good deer, it wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation.
That is a conversation, because I did a stupid little video a couple days ago, and I'm like, you want to kill more turkeys? Go to where there's more turkeys. Mm-hmm. Like, if you want to consistently kill more turkeys, go to where there's a lot of turkeys. And so many people, like, and I've talked about this several times, like, you have to know your expectations. Like, I grew up in Northwest Arkansas, and when I go back home to hunt with Dad, I don't expect to shoot a 140. I'm going to be happy if a 110 comes out, and I'm going to shoot it. Like, you have to know where you're hunting and the realistic expectations about where you're hunting. So many dudes want to kill a 160. They don't have 160s. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't kill a 160 if there's no 160s. So many people are chasing a 180, and I'm like, dude, your farm only holds 140s. Like, sorry, you're going to chase a 180 for the next 5 years and never see one. And so you just got to know your expectations. But, like, I also tell, like, so many guys are like, where should I hunt? Where there's deer. Like, that's like, it sounds like a butthead, but, like, you want to kill deer, go to where there's deer, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Finding them is the hard part.
Finding them is the hard part. So I'm in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Our deer population is plummeting right now due to multiple factors, but I have no problem hunting the best deer that I have on camera. And,
for sure.
Most times it is a 110. I completely agree though. If you want to shoot a 180, you got to go find a place where there's a 180.
Yeah.
You can't manifest something like that, no matter how bad you want it.
And, that's part of going back to that whole tell the story deal, because with how social media has grown and with what social media is now, we've casted this misconception that there's a 180 behind every tree. Like, we've casted this idea that anybody can kill a 180. Dude, do you know the percentage of bow hunters that actually kill a 180? It is minuscule. It's a fraction of it's less than 5% of bow hunters kill a 180. Like, it's so, you have such a small chance of killing a 180, but we've just casted this idea that, like, man, everybody's killing 180s. You're the only one that's not. And again, that goes back to sharing the story about the full hunt, sharing the story about, hey, I shot at a 130 and missed. Then I ended up shooting a 115. Like, but so many people, they don't want to share that story because it's not a 180, Yeah.
Right. It's funny because I've spent a lot of time at outfitters, over the last 4 years, even 6-7 years, down in Illinois, Pike County, Illinois. I've done a lot of shoots down there, and you talk to these guys who travel all over, hunt all over, shoot mega giants. And I ask them what their favorite deer is. And it's very often, 130, 140 class deer, because it's the story, it's how the hunt unfolded instead of what the harvest was.
Oh, and 100%, man.
Yeah.
And
no,
go ahead.
Yeah. So I edited a hunting show, for a few years. And I got out of it because I felt that the industry was portraying that there's opportunity for anybody to go out and shoot a 160 to 180. That's what the show was about, was big deer, hunting in all these different locations. And I started to feel that, I want to tell stories that are relatable. So I started filming my buddies and stuff, and, they're shooting these 120 to 150 class deer. And I found myself enjoying that and producing those YouTube shows a lot more than the show where the guy was shooting a 160 plus deer. The big thing for me is with photo and video, it has to be relatable. It has, like, the viewer has to be able to connect with that experience. So if somebody's chasing a 120 and shoots a 120 on camera. Like, I would much rather tell that story, because that's something that's very relatable to people. They connect with it. They can put themselves in that person's shoes, pulling the trigger on a 120. So those are my favorite hunts to capture, is when somebody has busted their butt, harvest this 120, and like is absolutely, thrilled about it.
100%,
it just
man.
comes back to like, the guys that I would share camp with at all these different outfitters, like consistently, I would ask these guys, like, they're down there chasing, that mythical 180, 190. And I would ask them what their favorite hunt is, what's their favorite hunting story. And consistently, like, they would come back and they would talk about the smallest deer that they shot.
Then why didn't you tell that story? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to ask them. Then why not share that story? And, but because you're 100% accurate. If I go through my trophy room and I point out my favorite deer, my favorite memories, not one of them is the biggest, and not one of them is because it's the biggest or because of how big it is. It's because of who I was with. It's because of how the hunt unfolded. It's because of the show that the deer put on before I killed him. Like, there's a whole lot more that goes into that outside of how big his antlers are. And in fact, that's usually the last part of it, because, dude, if I've got a kid with me, like if I've got one of my children with me, I don't care if it's a stinking spike or a 200, it's dying. Like, because my kids want to see that. I want to experience that with my kids. I want to share that with my kids, because my kids want to eat the deer that they shot. Like, I'm shooting it, and it doesn't really matter what it scores. Now, I was pretty stoked that deer that me and my son shot together. I honestly never cared much about the score, the inches, the antlers. Sent it to some buddies. Sent it to his name is Tim Rzuski. He's the director of records at Pope and Young. And I sent it to Tim, and he's like, dude, that'll make book for sure. And I'm like, really? I honestly didn't think it would. And he's like, yeah. I think it would make book. And it measured out like 125 and some change, which minimum is 125. Nice. And I'm like, wow. Like, so it was, and again, guys, and I don't mean to get on a Pope and Young rant again, but it's something to where when I'm dead and gone and there's a house fire and the antlers are gone and there's nothing to remember that book by, it's now forever cemented in history. And my son can go back and say, hey, that's the deer me and dad shot together. It's right there. 124 and 3/8. It's right there. Or 125 and 3/8. Sorry. It's right there. And so that's another reason, man, like, it's just cemented in history and forever that deer will be, memorialized for what he was and for the story that it was. So anyways, no, you also said something that got me interested about Pike County, because it was largely regarded as like the place to shoot a booner. Like, if you want to shoot a booner, go to Pike County. Every time you sit, you're going to shoot a booner. If you look around this tree, there'll be another booner. If you miss a booner, don't worry, another booner's coming. Like, it was largely regarded as that. Recently, though, I don't want to say decline, but I think because of the overpopulation of the place and just everybody wanting to go there to kill deer, those booners have become fewer and fewer. Deer have quit growing as big because people are shooting them younger. So on the note of hunt where there's big deer, on the note of if you want to kill a 180, go to where there's a 180. You still have to let those deer grow. You know what I mean? Like, you still have to consider the herd. You still have to consider what's best for the herd. And sometimes, I hate to tell you guys this, sometimes shooting the 180 isn't what's best for the herd. That's something that's hard to hear. It's hard to hear you've got a 180 and that's not the deer you should shoot off that property.
Yeah, totally agree. So my buddy has a lease down there, and they are very, very strict on which deer they shoot and which they let walk. I totally agree. Pike County, people think that they can go there and that they're going to see 5 180s in a sit. I have been there a lot. I have filmed there a lot. And I can count the number of times that I've seen that class of deer with one finger.
Yeah. Now,
150s and 160s, you're going to see a lot of them. But like you said, a lot of them get shot at that point and they don't ever get the chance to be that 180, 190.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do think Pike County, the marketing around it. I mean, growing up, reading all these hunting magazines, like Pike County got marketed hard and it worked.
I wonder if it's still, hold on, I'm looking it up. Counties.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's still like the past year was in the top counties for Boone and Crockett's. Why I'm looking at this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to share, Buffalo County, Wisconsin is number 1.
I believe that.
Interesting. Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri, Kansas. Okay. Now I know this is garbage. And Boone and Crockett, we got to have a talk. In what world has Arkansas ever made a list about Boone and Crockett deer? I was born and raised there. I've hunted there a ton. Now, to be fair, it lists the top 8, and then it gives bonus states of Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee. I believe Texas. I don't know that I believe Tennessee, and I don't know that I believe Arkansas. However,
sounds like you mean.
However, this is 100% of the reason why states need your data points. Because maybe I was hunting in the wrong parts of Arkansas, and the rest of the Arkansas, they're submitting all these points, all these data points that show that we killed giants. The number 1 county overall is Buffalo County, which we've heard often, with 150 entries in the record book. That's insane.
Okay. That's wild.
Illinois, which of course, where the new world record is from, Pike County rates number 10.
Okay.
So Pike County is number 10, which you want to talk about counties. I mean, that's still top 10 counties. That's pretty insane.
Yeah, it is.
I got to see what they say about Arkansas, though. This is blowing my mind. Arkansas rounds out the top of the special states thanks to, it's one deer. And this guy looks like he's from Arkansas. No offense, buddy. I actually had a dude, I'll finish this sentence in a minute. I had a dude come up to my porch and he was trying to sell me something. Like, dude is literally trying to sell me on something. I don't even remember what it was. It was like retirement or something. And my son runs up, and I'd already told him, yeah, I'm from Arkansas, born and raised, moved here, 8 years ago, whatever. And my son runs up and he goes, "Oh, what's your name, buddy?" And I said, "Tucker." And he said, "Yo, that sounds like an Arkansas name." And I'm like, "What the heck's that supposed to mean? Like, you're trying to sell me something? You're gonna make fun of my son's name and the state I'm from? I don't even know what that means, dude." Yeah. Anyways, so this is looks like Arkansas made the list based off of one guy's deer.
Okay.
William Lloyd, which again represents everything that Arkansas is. Just Google it if you need to know. That scored 201/8 and ranked 17 all time and number 1 in the state, pending review by the judges at panel. Blah blah blah. Cool. Shows why effective. And here, dude, this is key to what we've been talking about. The story of this deer, of this Arkansas buck, shows why effective deer management in many states is creating the potential for record book bucks being harvested, even in states that haven't traditionally been known for trophy deer. 100%. Arkansas is now the number 15th state overall with 254 total entries and joins Ohio, Kansas, Indiana, and Oklahoma that all moved up in the ranks. Dude, that's 100%. So let's take a step back. We talked about if you want to kill 180, you got to have 180s. If you want to kill 160, you got to have 160s. Sometimes that's going to take years and years and years of growth. Sometimes that's going to take years and years and years of investing into a property. Sometimes that takes decades of investing into a property. I've got friends who plant trees and they're like, I'm never going to get to hunt these trees, but my kids will. My deer will never benefit from these trees, but my kids' deers will. My grandkids' deer will. And I'm creating a property that my grandkids can shoot booners on. Like, this will not change my hunting of this property. It won't. I'm planting trees that won't grow for 40 years, but my grandkids are going to have a property to hunt on. So guys, I don't care where you're at. I don't care. The reason that these deer in these states are notoriously small is because the management of the deer in those states are they suck. People don't manage them. Because, dude, listen, growing up in Arkansas, rednecks don't pass deer. Like, they don't say, like, oh, he's not big enough. They shoot and they eat. They're not hungry, I'll tell you that. But they're also not growing big deer. But if you have the opportunity, then you can give the deer the nutritional values that they need to grow big deer. And if you look at those states that offer the top, they're farming states. There's a reason deer in Kansas are bigger than in Arkansas, because in Arkansas, you don't find no corn. You don't find soybeans. You're hunting acorns, and deer aren't going to get big on acorns. But if you give them nutritional values that they need for years, you'll grow big deer. So sometimes you got to look at the big picture and not, man, I want to kill a big old deer right now, but I want to create a safe haven. I want to create a property that's going to give them safety. It's going to give them food. It's going to give them water. It's going to give them the resources to where 5 years down the road, I'm consistently shooting big deer.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. I've got property here, and honestly, it's 90% timber. I've got a couple hundred acres. It's 90% timber. But the area around it is getting built up, new houses, people selling off these 5-10 acre pieces. And what it's doing is it's just driving deer into my property. There's other neighbors with big chunks too. And you're exactly right though. Like you can't make a change to the property and then expect that fall you're going to see a bigger deer. It's a compounding effect over the next few years. And like you said, in 10, 15, 20 years, that's when you're really going to notice consistent results. But it takes the time, the effort, the dedication to start that process now, and you'll see those results down the road. But I think that's another thing that the marketing side of the hunt industry has really had an impact on, is that people think they can put in a food plot and suddenly they're going to pull in the biggest deer that they've ever seen, right? Yeah. It's just, people have to be willing to put in the work, and you have to start now to gain the results in 5 or 10 years. Yeah.
Throwing out a bag of Big and J doesn't mean you're now going to have 180s. That's not how it works. Because if there's not 180s I don't want to say on your property, because you could pull deer from other properties, but if there's not a 180 within 5 miles, a food plot's not going to pull a 180 in. I'm sorry. And this is really beneficial. I would encourage everybody to go back and listen. I don't know what episode it was. It was a while back. I'm going to guess like October. We did an episode with the NDA called The Science of Deer Movement. And deer aren't just going to up and relocate. Like, you're not going to pull deer. There's not going to be a deer 20 miles away here. Oh man, Dylan put in a dope food plot. I'm going to bounce and go live over there. It's not how deer work. Deer don't just uproot themselves and go move somewhere else because homeboy planted a food plot. It's not how it works. So yeah, I mean, you still have to have the deer in the area. And what we mean by future generations is like you're building those deer in that area. I don't like this word. I've heard it used before, but you're farming those deer. You are growing those deer by every form of the word. You are feeding them. You're giving them structures to live in. You're providing them water. You're keeping them safe. You're helping with coyote populations. You're you're letting deer grow rather than shooting them. You are, by every stretch of the word, farming that deer. And then you're growing a healthier herd, and down the road you're going to be shooting bigger deer.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't happen in a year. A lot of guys, that's another misconception. I passed the deer 1 year, next year he's going to be a mega giant. Because you passed a 2-year-old, you still got to let him grow for 3 more years, 4 more years in some places. So walk me through, we're talking about growing deer. We're talking about, creating this place to kill bigger and better deer. That takes knowing your herd. Okay. I better be careful, because people decades before cameras were managing deer properties.
Yeah.
However, it's very, very, very hard, and you have to spend a ungodly amount of boots on the ground time to see all the deer, to know all the deer.
Yeah.
You got to be shed hunting and finding every shed on the property. Like it just takes really an amount of time that 99% of people can't put in without the help of cameras to know what's on your property. So if you're looking at your property, you said you had 200 acres?
Yeah.
How do you use trail cameras on that 200 acres to know what's on the property, to grow what's on the property? How do you use them to your advantage? How do you set them up? How do you run them? Walk me through that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like you said, before cameras were a thing, people had to put boots on the ground, and people still do. And I like to put boots on the ground. But the biggest advantage with cell cameras is that you're not pressuring your property. Period. You're not disturbing the deer. You're watching them from afar. You're watching them in real time. And that's the biggest advantage of them, in my opinion. You're seeing what's happening on your property, but you don't have to be out there to watch it.
Yeah.
So in the springtime, late winter, early spring, when you're talking shed season, you can be watching the bucks to see when they drop. So you're not out there pushing the deer around with, shed hunting. Like you're seeing the antlers as they drop. I like to use cameras. So our deer migrate. They go to their winter yards and they come back. And I like to use cameras in the springtime to see the health of the herd, to see what, how the herd that left came back and how they look. But spring, summer, getting into fall, like I put my cameras on just my main travel corridors because they are using them constantly. I've got food plots, I've got pastures, and there are some cameras where I hang high just to get a really wide view and see, how many deer are congregating in a food plot, every evening in the mornings. But the biggest thing is, you have to put the cameras where the deer are, of course. But I like to see when they're traveling those corridors, when they're on the trails, when they're getting into the food plots. So then when you start getting into fall, you can start to push the cameras a little bit further to find out where they're bedding and things like that. But the biggest change when I started using cellular trail cameras was you don't have to be out there to see what's happening.
Sure.
That's the biggest advantage, because as soon as you start putting boots on the ground, as soon as you start walking, pushing through their bedding and things, like that's when you start blowing them out.
I also think that trail cameras not only give you a lot of intel and help you more successfully hunt your deer, but that it also helps you share that story. It also helps you share the long-term story. And what I mean by that is the long-term story of that deer's life. Because there's deer that my kids know. Like there's deer that my kids for years have heard dad talk about this deer. And so when I finally kill them, it's not like which one did you kill? It's, they know that the single deer that I've been hunting. But you're helping to share that story. You're helping to shape that story of like, listen, I didn't just walk out and shoot this animal. I've got pictures of this dude from when he has spots to when he's a 160. Yeah. Like I've got every year's pictures of this deer since he was born. I watched him, with spots suck on mama's teat. Like I know this deer. I've spent time with this deer, and you're helping share that story and show that story of like, wow, this guy cares about these deer. Like, this guy loves the deer that he's hunting. And it just goes back to that old saying that no one loves the deer as much as the hunter. And it's so true. But you're with trail cameras, you're helping to just share that story of like what you're doing, the work you're putting in to chase the deer, but also the sharing the story of that deer's life. And like, hey, look, man, you remember when I had him on camera in 2019 and I missed him because I was at work or whatever? You're just sharing the story of the cat and mouse, the chess game that you've been playing with this deer. And so I think trail cameras play an important role in the hunting world. I probably shouldn't tell a trail camera guy this, but I also think trail cameras have hurt the hunting story a lot too. And that's hard to share because I just said it helps the story. I shouldn't say it hurts the story. It does nothing but helps the story. I think it hurts us as hunters.
It doesn't tell the complete story.
Yeah.
Like
not only that,
happening.
But do you remember being a kid? You remember being a kid and not knowing what you were going to see? Like not knowing, okay, I know that I see tracks. I know there's deer here. But then you just sit and you're like, oh my gosh, there is a buck here. Like, and that's not a bad buck. I don't want to shoot him, but that's not and then, an hour later, a big buck comes out and you're like, holy crap, there's a big buck here. And you shoot him like the first time you see him and you kill him, I miss that, dude. I miss that feeling of like, I don't know what's here, but I know it's about to get crazy, like, and so now it's just kind of taken away from some of that like excitement because it's like the moment a deer steps out, you're like, oh, that's the small 8. I'm looking for the big 10. Like, you automatically, if I see a deer come out, I'm like, I'm not killing him because I know him, he's young. He's not big enough. There's bigger deer here. And then the moment a deer comes out, you're like, that's the one, I'm killing him. So it's just kind of taken away from that joy of like, oh, there's the one, I want to kill him,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that for sure. And there are definitely times I do have stands where I don't have cameras by them. And like sometimes
good for
those
you.
are my favorite sits. Yeah. Yeah. It just goes back, to when we were growing up hunting and we didn't have any idea what was out there and something with antlers steps in and your heart starts slamming. Like that's a feeling that you can't beat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's what I keep telling myself. I'm going to get a property and never put a camera on it and just hunt it like a kid. And then of course, when you get a new property, you're like, oh my gosh, dude, I bet there's mega giants in here. I got to throw some cameras up and figure out what's going on in this place. And then you're like, well, crap. I told them.
I think my favorite part about trail cameras, like, learning your deer is one thing, but like having that window to what's happening out there, like I find just thrilling. Like seeing naturally what's happening out there, whether it's a skunk or a turkey or a rabbit or like, you're just seeing a view that you don't get to see otherwise.
Yeah, for sure.
And like it's a big turkey, big Tom comes in and, I download the video and my kids want to see it. And like, it's just giving you that window to what's happening in the woods that you wouldn't have otherwise. And that's my favorite part about them is, you can see what's out there. We've got wolves here. We've got mountain lions. We've got black bears. Like every now and then one of those will show up and, you don't see evidence of them otherwise.
Yeah.
But it's like that big gray wolf came through last Saturday at noon and I was out turkey hunting at 10 o'clock. Like that's, you start to get maybe more of a respect for what's happening out there when you're not out there, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Especially when there's predators. Yeah.
It really teaches you too, like how small of a part we play in the shape of nature.
Yeah.
Like in the grand scheme of the world, how small of a role we play. It really does. It teaches you a whole lot, man, just to be able to look and see. And, I've caught some crazy cool things on camera that I'm sure glad I had a camera out for. I think I've shared this story, but I was, this is in South Kansas, no elk anywhere near us. I mean, we don't have any elk. And I got a picture one night of just a butt walking off camera. And I was like, that's a giant butt. And I honestly, I thought, dude, nobody's got cattle around there. Like I'm thinking about the houses around and the farms around. I'm like, nobody's got any cattle around there. So like, cause my first thought was like somebody's horse got out, and I'm like, but there's no cattle around there. And like, I'm just racking my brain, and then I'm like, whatever, I go on with life. And really I came to the conclusion. I'm like, it was just a deer caught at a weird angle, made it look big. And, and then like 2 days later, I get an elk walking across the camera, and I'm like, what the heck? And like, I connected the dots. I'm like, that was the butt that I saw 2 nights ago.
Right.
And I call my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I just got an elk on camera, dude. Like here, that property in Kansas, I just got an elk on camera. And he's like, dude, somebody's playing a prank on you. And I'm like, playing a prank on me? I watched it walk across the screen. I'm like, if that's a prank, dude, kudos to stinking them. Like and when I told him that, he just thought I meant like I saw a tine, or I saw, half an antler. And I'm like, Dad, I watched it from point A to point B walk across the camera, full size body, like elk. And I sent him the video, and he's like, yeah, sure enough, you got an elk there. I'm like, duh, I told you. But I'm like, man, I'm so glad, because I'd have never known in a million years that an elk walked across my property. Like, that was crazy cool. I've got some crazy pictures. I've got a picture of a hawk picking up a squirrel. Like, you just see it. And you see a hawk picking up a squirrel. I mean, there's just crazy cool things that happen. And I'm glad I got a camera, because again, it helps me tell that story. It helps me share the story and let it unfold. And it just shows people like, hey, I'm out in June working. Like, it's, again, for all of you guys that think you just walk out and shoot a 160, look, I'm out here in June sweating my sweating like crazy, working like crazy to try and shoot a 120, bro. Like, it takes work, it takes time, and it's just part of sharing that story. So, I just wanted to kind of go down that road real quick, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, and really, like, the Michigan DNR never acknowledged that we had mountain lions in the UP up until like 6 years ago. People had them on their cameras, but finally they got a lion on one of their cameras, and so they had to acknowledge that we've had them here. I saw one, man, it was 25 years ago. Like, literally saw one out in the wild up here, and they would not confirm it until they got it on their own camera.
Yeah.
But last fall, I never got them on camera, but 2 of my neighbors, 240s away, like, had lions on camera.
That's crazy.
And my next door neighbor didn't believe we had wolves here. Right here, there's a pack like 5 miles away, until I started showing him my camera pictures last fall.
Makes you a little more nervous walking to your tree stand, doesn't it?
You definitely think about it. Yeah, especially early morning. Those early morning sits. You think twice about that.
The scariest thing of walking to a tree stand, and for a boy growing up in Arkansas, didn't have any pheasants. Definitely the scariest thing. But when you're walking to your tree stand, and I remember like the first time I moved to Kansas and the first time I was going hunting, it was super, super cold and like a heavy frost. And so pheasants will hold a lot tighter. If it's warm, they're just going to run before you ever get there. So this pheasant just holds tight. And I literally, it's between my legs flying up. And dude, I started shadow boxing, dude, for like 20 minutes. I'm like, yeah. I was fighting something, dude, that wasn't there. And it terrified the mess out of me. I'm like, I don't even want to hunt anymore. I'm like, I don't know what that creature was, dude, but it was coming to get me, bro. And then, oh man, it scared me.
Of course, we have grouse here, and when wolves and cougar mountain lions are on your mind, and a grouse takes off from 3 feet overhead, that gets you hurt.
Oh yeah. Oh man, Scott, where can they find you at, man? Where can they go follow you and watch some of this awesome content you roll out?
Yeah. So Instagram is at Scott Niska. My website is scottniska.com. You can check out my photos and some of the videos I've done there. On Instagram, I'll post videos that I do for buddies and with links to their YouTube channels. But yeah, so that's where I'm found.
Guys, I oftentimes say that I always have a binocular harness on my chest. What good is a binocular harness without a good set of binoculars? I am a sucker for fine Japanese glass. I love good optics. I love spending time behind it. It's just fun. It's fun to go out and look at stuff, but also good optics make spotting and looking through them a whole lot more enjoyable. Kowa Optics does it and does it better than anyone else, in my opinion. They have some of the finest Japanese glass on planet Earth. It's all I've used for the past, 8 years or so. This right here, the Kowa 55, is one of the best products ever made in the history of the universe. It is the smallest, most compact scope you can get, but it still offers phenomenal glass. It's really hard to find a spotter that is this small, this light, this compact. You can throw it in your backpack. You can leave it in your truck. It's so small and so compact, but it still offers phenomenal glass. This is one of my favorite products ever. Guys, if you're in the market for new optics, I would highly encourage you to check out Kowa Optics because they are, in my opinion, the best glass that you can buy. Go check them out. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I would highly encourage you to go check out Scott because he just does a really good job of putting out some incredible content, sharing his story. It's always inspirational for me to see somebody who's just constantly sharing good, high quality, clean, classy content, sharing the story of their hunt. So go check out Scott because he's got just an incredible way of sharing his story. Thank you for listening. Y'all guys have a fantastic week.
Thanks, Dylan.